Hello, everyone, and welcome to our student stream. I am Steven Torres, and I am the faculty director here at Career Launch, and I'm excited for today's episode. Of course, I'm here with
Sean O'Keefe. I'm the founder, partner, and chief impact officer at Career Launch, and we've created this student stream to complement our efforts in partnering with colleges and career programs across the country. We've been hearing that some students want to be able to receive some of the Career Launch programming and methodology and tips. And we don't have partnerships with all the colleges and universities across the country. So this is one of our ways to provide some value directly to students.
Awesome. So, and I'm hoping everyone could check their settings just to make sure our echo cancellation is on there, because it seems like we're getting some feedback, but hopefully it won't bother too much. And we have an amazing guest today. Had a chance to speak with her earlier this week as we prepared for today's student stream. So we're with Lauren Strnad, and Lauren actually is a graduate. You graduated what year, Lauren?
2016 now.
2016.
We're coming up on the 5-year anniversary.
Oh, that's awesome. And she actually went through the Career Launch method from a friend. A friend told her about it, and she connected with Sean, and she's been able to use this method in just a really amazing way. And we're going to talk to Lauren about her story, and she's going to share this with you because especially for those of you who might not be in the United States thinking, well, maybe this only applies to here. Lauren has the story of how she used many of these concepts internationally and how she got into an industry that is really challenging to get into and so forth. So Lauren, welcome. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you. I'm excited to talk to everyone about it.
Yeah, let's start to dig in. So let's start with your story. How did you first hear about Career Launch? It was a friend, is that correct? Tell us about this.
So basically, my best friend Kaylee is a year younger than me, and she went to Santa Clara. And while she was in, I think, her senior year, I was living abroad. And when I was living abroad, I was telling her that I have this idea. I want to work in sports, but I'm not really sure how to. So she's like, hey, I have this awesome professor. He's really great about giving practical advice because we're both very much about practical. We hate the theoretical. Mm-hmm. We hate when they're like, oh, there's this far off chance you could maybe do this. We're like, no, give it to me down and dirty. I want to know what it is about, and let's see how we can figure it out. So she's like, this professor can help you. Just send him an email and say you're friends with Kaylee and go from there. So basically, that's what I did. I sent Sean an email being like, hi, I know you don't know me. I went to Santa Clara last year. I'm living abroad. I'm trying to do this. I'm not exactly sure how to do it. All the advice I've been given so far has been basically useless. Is there any way to help? So that's kind of where the conversation started. My idea was essentially just to work in sports in Europe and without a passport in Europe. So that also adds a complication factor because someone needs to sponsor me. And just, what advice do you have?
Yeah. Wow. That's so, and by the way, for those of you who are watching right now, Lauren is right now in Berlin, Germany, correct?
Correct. So it is nighttime for us. You can see out there.
That's awesome. So now, Sean, let me ask you this: when a student reaches out, like this, who wasn't necessarily one of your students, but a referral, what are you thinking?
Oh, not a whole lot different from a current student. I just want to help. The fact that my life was changed by a professor 20 years ago, and I've dedicated my life to paying that forward and helping as many students as I can. Whether the student was in my class from my university or not from the university. I just want to help. And Lauren and I met, I mean, what was it, 3, 4 years ago?
Yeah, almost 4 years ago.
And so at the time, this was pre-career launch. The idea of career launch was just an idea at the time, and but it was actually conversations and experiences and working with students like Lauren who weren't from my class or were from other universities that I realized I'm just one person and I won't be able to continue fitting everyone into my office hours or doing one-on-ones. It's not scalable. And that, through conversations with non-students like Lauren is and then encouragement from others at my home university and advisors like you, Stephen, was the reason that we started Career Launch, to be able to help more people in a way that's scalable.
Yeah. And so I want to be really clear about this. So Lauren, before you started engaging with, Sean and the career launch method, you had already graduated. So you were finished with undergrad. Is that right?
Correct. So I, right after university or college, now I've gotten to the European terms. Um, I decided to go to Italy to live there, to work there, and to kind of just travel. And basically, what happened was my junior and senior year, I had internships at Morgan Stanley. They had offered me a position. And during that time, I had traveled and I had loved it. And I was like, okay, I kind of want to do it more and see how it is. And everyone from position, like an intern, all the way up to senior level, was like, hey, if you're going to do this now, because otherwise you'll regret it in 5 years and say, oh, I'm too busy, my career, I have a house, I have a boyfriend, husband, kids, whatever. The excuses, whether they're excuses or not, come. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go for it. And right after June, I graduated. July, I was in Italy and I was teaching English. I knew for me, unlike Sean, teaching wasn't not my passion. So
I think we may have had a little bit of a connection lag there. But I think what Lauren was saying was that she went and teaching wasn't her thing at the time. So she needed to figure out a way, I guess, to figure out that next step. And Sean, do you find that a lot with students after they've graduated?
Yeah, I mean, it happened for me. I got what I thought was a dream job. And then 2 to 3 years after being in that dream industry, I realized it wasn't. It was no longer my dream. So my quote unquote dream job has changed 3 times already.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Welcome back, Lauren. Sorry, we had a
that.
little. That's okay. We had a little technical glitch. Don't forget, she's in another country on, almost not quite the opposite side of the world, but in a different area. So that bugs can happen like that. So you were saying you had graduated, you you were teaching, but you knew teaching wasn't your thing, and you were trying to go somewhere. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so teaching wasn't my thing, but it was a way to support me while I was living abroad. And that's kind of when the recognition of, hey, I love soccer. I grew up playing. I grew up all around it. That is something I would love to incorporate, especially seeing firsthand how the Europeans are. So Stephen and I spoke about this before. The Europeans for soccer is like the Americans for football on steroids. It is just insane. So I was like, I want this to be a part of my life. How do I do it? I have no credentials because I did a poli-sci degree in entrepreneurship and public health science. I had nothing to do really with sports management, any of that. And I didn't speak any languages at the time. And I didn't have a European passport. So I'm like, the odds are stacked against me.
Well, Sean, does this sound familiar, by the way?
Yeah,
What did you
just a
get into
bit.
sports with no one in there? And I want everyone out there who's watching to understand Lauren's situation, right? Like, recap that again. She's traveling internationally teaching English. She wants to get into an industry that she doesn't know anyone, doesn't speak the language, is in this completely different country. Many people would be going, Lauren, what are you thinking? Right? You might
I
have
mean, I
even
had
say
a
that.
lot of those. Yeah. Between my family, friends, and even myself at a lot of times, I'm like, why am I doing this? I could have easily gone back home. I know people in the US. I can get a job. I can get a better paying job. like all the factors. I'm like, why am I doing this? I mean, part of the time I'm still thinking that, but that's life.
That's awesome. Okay, so you wanted to do this. You reach out to Sean and tell us about some of the things that started to change after you started working with Sean. What were maybe some of the concepts that he started to share with you that really you started to go, oh, this is something I could utilize, and then we'll get into what you actually did. But let's start about the
Yeah.
concepts.
So basically, the one concept that I really took and ran with was the informational interview. So, and then also the 5 by 25, where I sat down and I made a list of the 25 people that I can reach out to. And I had it where I wanted to reach out to them at least 4 to 5 times. So basically, what happened was that I made the list. It was an Excel spreadsheet. I'm very particular about this stuff and kind of crazy on it, but it was very beneficial because I could see exactly going down the list. Okay, who have I talked to? When did I talk to them? Did they respond? Did they not respond? And so I would send basically the same email, look at their LinkedIn. And in particular, for me, the goal was AS Roma, which is owned by Americans, and in Rome, which is where I was living. So my thought was, you have this American company essentially in Italy where I can bridge the two gaps together. And I would go and I would say, hey, I'm a student. I wasn't a student at the time. I said I was a student and I would like to spend 15 minutes of your time getting to know you. So I think I sent out like probably 200 emails. I
Wow.
did get back, like, I don't remember how many I received back, but there was a few people in particular, one person, Paul Rogers, who was the chief strategic officer at AS Roma. So pretty high up. He was British, and he responded back saying, "Oh, I'm actually in Rome," because he was living in Boston at the time. Are you free for a coffee? So I went down the streets of Rome wearing my wedges on cobble streets, which I don't recommend to anyone, and got coffee with him. And it ended up being an hour where his wife was calling him, being like, "Hey, where are you?" And he's like, "Oh, sorry, I lost track of time." So got a great conversation with him, but he kind of expressed the same things that I knew before. He's like, you don't speak Italian, you don't have a European passport. Like, if you're in Boston, we can do this. And I was like, well, I'm not in Boston, don't want to go back to Boston or the US at the moment. I want to stay here. So he's like, okay, well, keep in touch with me, let me know. So I was like, okay. And he left me with the kind of task of, a way to keep in touch was through, he's like, we have this problem at Roma where we want to get better with customer service. How do we do that without basically putting any money forth? I'm like, okay, great, thank you. So I took that away, and at that point was going with Kaylee, my friend, on a 6-week travel vacation. And basically every morning I would wake up and work on this project. And I would keep in touch with him and be like, hey, I'm working on this. And he went radio silent.
Wait,
So at
wait, wait.
that
So
point,
I want, Lauren, I want to understand this. You started working on this project, but you didn't have an internship with him.
exactly.
Wait. Whoa. Okay, we got to talk about this. So you started doing work, but you didn't have a job.
Yeah,
What were
actually,
you
now that you're saying
thinking?
that, I was thinking that this is my opportunity to show him what, if I'm willing to do this without anything attached to it, look at what I can do for you if I was working for you.
So
So if you saw, oh,
yes,
go ahead.
Lauren. I want everyone who's watching to listen to what Lauren's saying right here. There's this concept that you do more than what you get paid for, right? And Lauren is an example of this right now, right? Think about it. She started doing work, but she didn't have a job. Most people, stop working when they get a job. Okay. Here's Lauren. She's working before she gets a job. And the thought process was, say that one more time, Lauren, because this is key. This is a mindset that I think everyone has to understand. Say it again. Why did you do this? You didn't have a job. You weren't getting paid. Why did you do this?
So it was really simple for me. It was like, okay, I'm going to prove to you, even if you don't see it right now, that you should hire me, because I'm going to be working like this if you do hire me. And I mean, I was traveling for 6 weeks. So we were in Santorini, we were in Lisbon, and I was finding a coffee shop in the morning and going to it at 7 a.m. before our tour started at 9 a.m. and working on it. And I think our moms both joined us on the trip at some point, and I was annoying them to death. I'm like, how do I get this guy to respond? And so they decided, they're like, just tell him you're going to be in Boston. I'm like, I'm not in Boston. They're like, no, just tell him that you're going to be in Boston in August and you would love to meet him. And I was like, okay, fine. So I like email him. I'm like, hey, I'm going to be in Boston. I would love to present to you what I've been working on. Is it a possibility to meet up? He responded back 24 hours later. Sure, let's meet on this day. Now I'm like, great, I got to get a flight to Boston.
Wow. So, I mean, that right there, I want everyone who is watching this to replay that because there's so much in that really shows what it takes to kind of stand out, right? There's, one of my mentors, John Maxwell, he has this law, he calls it the law of intentionality, right? And that's essentially what Lauren was practicing here. She was practicing this law of intentionality. She found the company she wanted. She found contacts that could get her that job, that internship. And then when she made the first contact, she asked what was a problem he was facing. She took that on by herself, right? So that demonstrated the initiative, right? The passion. The other thing it demonstrates is the ability to actually GSD, right? Get bleep stuff done. Right. And then she has the audacity, right? And I say that in a good way, to set up a time to present this to him, and she doesn't even have she's not really going to Boston, but she is now. So let's talk about this then. So what happened?
So I went to Boston. I made up a story that my sisters were touring schools there. So that's why I was there. Because I'm like, I'm not going to really tell you I came here just for this. I felt like that was a little bit too presumptuous. And I gave him kind of three different options. And I made a whole little booklet from it. And I presented it to him. And he really liked it. He was like, okay, let's keep in touch. He's like, again, it kind of went back to the caveat. If you're here in Boston, we're happy to do something. In Rome, it's really difficult. And just know like the industry is difficult. And kind of the whole thing was just be prepared that this is going to be a long road. He's like, if I can help you, I will try to, but it's not something I can necessarily just give you because I like you and I see how hard you're working. So I, after that, went back to California for a month and then headed back out to Rome for the second year. And I was like, okay, at this point, what am I going to do? And that's where I was contacting Sean. I'm like, okay, we've gotten to the point where I know I want to go into here. I know I want to do it, but how do we do it? And that's kind of where we both were like, we need some like credentials behind your name. So it came to the point where I was like, well, let's do an MBA in sport management. So luckily, because of that, the costs here for an MBA are a lot cheaper than the US. And I figured this was also a good way for me to see, okay, did I like what I did with AS Roma and this guy, Paul Rogers, or was it because of the challenge or because of the industry? And I felt like the MBA would give me kind of that basis to learn from, okay, what part of the industry do I like? Is it the passion? Is it business? Where can I kind of go from there, while giving me some credentials afterwards to put forth and giving me a whole nother year of experience in Europe.
This is so good. And again, I want everyone to see what Lauren's talking about here. As she's going through this, right? She's reflecting on all of these experiences, right? That is something that's so important. Notice how she tried to figure out, was it I just like this? Did I like the area? To really find out, where does that passion lie, right? Earlier, you saw the comment, Washington said, 100%. And I totally agree. So after you figured out, okay, this is what I want, then what?
So we get to Madrid, which is where I did my MBA. So I did my MBA with Real Madrid, which partnered with a university there. So I felt like Real Madrid, having that big name, everyone essentially knows them, whether you like soccer or you don't. So even that part of it was just a huge win already. And there was kind of a turning point because the NBA was for a year, and you would go and meet these professionals who worked at Real Madrid. We went to the stadium almost weekly. Like, I can give a tour of the stadium now, but there was always the same kind of hunger from everyone of how do I make an impression to these Real Madrid professionals, to these other sports professionals too, and how do you kind of get them to be on your side?
Mm-hmm.
So a few months went by. At that point, I had gotten an internship doing marketing for this nonprofit, and that worked with sports. It was like soccer to change the world, bringing tourism to different places and using soccer as a way of kind of showing what they can do for the community, which was really interesting, but not exactly where I wanted to go, where that was more sponsorships and partnerships
Mm-hmm.
that I really liked. So you're going through and you're meeting all these different professors that have contacts everywhere. And there's essentially 90 of us that are all trying to do the same thing. So some
Mm-hmm.
people have 10 years of experience. Some of them are fresh out of university. Some are like me that have worked in between, but don't really have anything in sports. So you have an array of people and just pushing really for the same thing. So there was one in particular, this person, David Hopkinson, who at the time was the global head of sponsorships.
Mm-hmm.
And he presented to our English class and Spanish class, so 150 people.
Wow.
And those 150 people afterwards basically all lined up to speak to him. So
The
I was like,
swarm. The
yeah,
swarm after a speaker, right?
it was. I mean, this one was even more so. Like, he's very charismatic. He is able to capture your attention. He's now working for Madison Square Garden, which is unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
And he had moved from our Maple Leaf group, so Toronto, the whole part of that. So
Gotcha. So let me guess, you actually just waited in line behind 100 other people so that you could not stand out, right?
initially, yes.
Okay.
So
And
I had
then
asked
tell us.
Yeah, so I had asked a question during it and I waited in line. I actually didn't get to meet him because he had to go to the restroom. So he left and never returned. So I'm like, okay, well, there goes kind of my chance. And so I got onto a call with my dad. I'm like, Dad, like I found the guy who I think would really kind of propel me. I think he has the same mindset as me. Like,
Mm-hmm.
if I can just get to talk to him, I know I can get something out of it. And so he's like, well, good luck. Like, what are you going to do? Like, you waited in line, you're going to send him an email, no thanks. So I think at that point I reached out to Sean and kind of said the same thing. I'm like, what can I do? He's like, send a thank you note, and not just an email or a LinkedIn message, like a handwritten note, and ask for time. So I was like, okay. So I went a step further. I was like, I had seen something, I don't remember where, but it had to do with like following in your footsteps. And so
Mm-hmm.
there's this a pair of socks that are Stance that are from my hometown in California. And I was like, okay, this connects me to the gift. It's not a big gift because obviously you don't want to go over and beyond, but it's a gift small enough to show that you put thought into it. And I knew I could buy them in Madrid. So I go and get a pair of socks and I go and write a thank you note saying like, thank you so much for your time. I enjoyed A, B, and C. I really hope to follow in your footsteps one day. Here are a pair of socks from my hometown. If you have 15 minutes, I would love to talk to you more, and put like a business card into it. And then I actually went 45 minutes to the training center of Real Madrid where his office was and dropped it off. So
Wow. So
that
okay,
40,
we got to stop there because this is just too good, right? This is just too good. So you decided to, wait in line, not happening, he leaves. The audacity to think, okay, I still want to connect with him, right? Because most people would have been like, oh, well, that one's gone and it's gone, right?
yeah.
And then you're like, okay, I got to do it. Does everybody see how Lauren her mind is progressing? Right. And then she goes and finds a gift. And this gift, again, I think what you said was spot on, right? It wasn't, you're not giving him a gold bar, right? But you're not just, send him a note. You had something that was distinct, that was relevant, that kind of tied in. And here is the key: memorable, right? So you
Yes.
had something that was memorable. And then did you hand write a note?
Yeah, so I hand wrote it, like wrote his name on it. And then the
Oh,
funny part was I don't speak Spanish. So I go to the Real Madrid training grounds and I'm like trying with my broken Spanish and at this point Italian to be like, hi, I have a gift for this person. He doesn't know it's coming. I don't know where he works exactly. Like, can you just give it to them? And the lady's like, no. I'm like, please. I'm like about to call my mom who speaks Spanish and be like, can you explain to her this is extremely important? But it was like 4 a.m. in the morning in California. So she wasn't awake. And I'm like, okay, what do I do? So I like try to explain it, finally explain it to her. She's like, okay, you need to go down to the garage and it needs to go through a security thing to make sure there's nothing like illegal or like a bomb. I'm like, what do you think this is? But I do it and I go through the garage and I'm like, hi, here are my socks and like card. Can you please take this? And the guy does, and I'm like, well, let's see if this ever even gets to the guy. Like, who knows? Like, they could really just throw it away for all I know.
Yeah.
And again, 24 hours later, I was in class and I had my Apple Watch on, and I get a message from a Spanish number. And it was like, hi, Lauren, like, this is David Hopkinson. I received your gift. This is the most creative thing I've ever seen. Let's have a 30-minute meeting. My assistant will contact you. So
Wow.
that opened the door.
Like, so Sean, as you're hearing this, I want to know what's going through your head, because this is a method that you talk about, something that you teach. Um, Tell me, what are you thinking as you hear this?
I'm just, kind of a proud older brother type of mindset, thought process, and just really grateful that I could have an impact similar to Professor Al Ferrer, who had a similar impact on me. And but I mean, Lauren went above. I mean, she took the mindset and the frameworks that we talk about at Career Launch and utilize inside the Career Launch method. But then she went above and beyond and really propelled things in her own way. And I didn't know all these details. This has been fabulous to listen in and to hear all of this.
And again, everyone out there, I want you to understand what Lauren was thinking, the approach that she took with it mentally, right? And then what she actually did, like some of these tactics. So you get this call, you set up the appointment to meet with him, and tell us how it turned out.
So also, I think because of what we're talking about here, I prepared a lot for this call or this meeting. So I bought new clothes. I listened to every single podcast he had been on. I went on through all the articles that he had been mentioned on, basically stalked his life, which was at some point kind of creepy. But I was like, if I'm going to get this time, I want to use this to my essentials. So I had this notebook and I had all my notes on one side of what I learned from what I've researched and then everything I wanted to ask after that. And
That's
so
just so good. So where did that come from? Where did this idea of like, I want to know everything? Because, frankly, what many people do is they, look at their LinkedIn profile and then that's it.
yeah.
Where did this idea of, okay, I really want to find out about this person? Where did that come from, Lauren?
I think originally it came from actually Sean when we did the informational interviews, because what I try to do whenever I sent out an email was find something that I could link them to on that email. So a little bit was through that. And then also from my own dad, he works in finance too. He would always be like, it's better to be over prepared than under prepared. So when I told him I have this meeting, he's like, you better spend hours on this, figuring out who this guy is and kind of what he thinks like, so that you can make the most out of it. So that between the two of them, I think I took it into the direction I could with like researching and going through it at all, and found really interesting things about him and like where he came. So finding out that he worked at the ticket stand to begin with, then worked his way up. So I was like, okay, here you have a similar kind of story. Obviously, I'm not working at a ticket stand, but I'm trying to get my way in any way I can. So like if you can parallel someone's story, I feel like they have more sympathy and empathy towards you, so that they want to help you in the future.
That's so good. Like Sean is probably just sitting there beaming, right? Because this is, I think, everyone who's listening to this, if you can take and replicate this mindset, these actions, these behaviors, you're going to find similar results, right? You're going to be able to do what you've heard Lauren talk about. Now, we're kind of wrapping up here. We only have a couple more seconds here. So Lauren, so tell us now how it all kind of turned out.
So I ended up doing a bunch of different things with the guy. I went to lunch with him afterwards. I still message him, but he left Real Madrid, and I actually got a job at One Football, which is owned by the top 10 clubs of soccer in the world, which is really cool. And it was essentially the same thing. I looked at startup companies at this point because I felt like there was more opportunities. So
Mm-hmm.
I changed the idea, but it was essentially the same thing, looking at the startups and also for me, the locations, where in Germany or where in Europe are the best options for me to A, get a visa, and B, work the easiest at everything.
Right.
So Berlin became one of those hot spots. And
Man,
then
that's
breaking it
awesome.
down, okay, to startups and going from there. So that's kind of essentially, it goes back to, like you said, the process of it was always kind of the same thing, but just tweaked a little bit to get a different result.
Right. And that's, I think, what everybody really, what I hope you get from today's student stream from Lauren is that this is a process, right? The career launch method is a method. It is a process that you can use and repeat to find, the internships, the jobs, and the things that you really want. If you want to learn more about this, by the way, we have a webinar coming up on March 17th. It should be scrolling across the bottom. How to access the hidden jobs and internships that others get. So if you want to know the process that Sean shared with Lauren, that's the place to come and check it out. You can register. The link is scrolling below. Also, check out our next student stream. It'll be here next Wednesday at 10:30. I want to thank you, Lauren, because this was just a tremendous. I mean, I'm sure we could probably talk for the next 2 hours, about this story and this journey. But Sean, any last thoughts from you before we end today's broadcast?
I'm reflecting on, I think this is episode 4 of our live streams here. And it's just really rewarding to hear the diversity in student experiences. We've had students who went through the method really early on, like sophomore year, first year. Lauren was post-grad, right? A year or two after graduation. We've had students, 2-year schools, 4-year schools, students of different age groups, different socioeconomic backgrounds. And it's really fun and rewarding for me to hear the stories and know that this method works for students regardless of what they're studying and what their next step in their career is.
Yeah, that's just fabulous. And, I love the lessons that you share today, Lauren, intentionality, preparation, right? Some of these things that are super important, persistence, all of the skills that everyone needs to really find that internship, that job, or even if you want to start your own company, those are the skills that you need. So thank you so much for your time. This will be, posted on Facebook and of course on YouTube. So we encourage you to come back, watch it again, share it with a friend. Be sure to connect with us, like us, all that fun stuff. And we'll talk to you soon. We had a comment here from someone listening to Lauren. Nice to hear your story. Yeah, it was absolutely amazing. He said, don't stop, keep it up. And I'm sure we can't wait to see where it all ends. Thank you everyone for joining us on today's student stream. We'll see you all next week. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thanks, Lauren.